expect some sort of taken quest, right? You expect this lady to get up and be in Cuba tomorrow. In April I read 6 books. I started multiple as usual, but I completed 6 books. So let's get right into it. The first book is Devil in Disguise by Lisa Kleypas. This book is number 7 of the Ravenels series. So Lisa Kleypas has written a lot of books that concurrent series that go together, and this book is it's a historical romance, English romance. It's about a widow, and she's running her deceased husband's shipping company. And then there's this man, Kerr McRae, who is a whiskey distiller, and he's coming from Scotland, and he needs to use the services of her shipping company. And this lady knows what she wants, okay? She knows that she would like this man. She hasn't been in a relationship since her husband died, and he is doing his best to resist. And let's just say that she gets what she wants. Yeah, I thought this book was really good. It was a nice read. I gave it 4 stars out of 5. It was enjoyable. I think that as far as strong characters go, both the male and the female were strong, and I think that there was some family intrigue in there. So on the side of Kerr's family, he has some family discoveries in this story, and so I think that it was an entertaining read. And then I just love when a woman, you know, in these stories, especially in the time that we were, when women were so kind of suppressed and didn't really go for what they wanted, weren't outspoken, weren't business leaders, stuff like that, that this was a really nice a really nice strong character for that time. So yeah, 4 out of 5 stars. So immediately after the last book, one of the characters in their care, yes, this is a spoiler, he found out that his father is like in the British, what's the word? He found out that his father was titled, and so I went back to the story of his dad, back to when his dad and his, I guess, stepmom met and got married. And so this is the story of Evangeline, or Evie, and Sebastian, and this story is really sweet as well. It's a really nice romance. I also gave this one a 4 out of 5. So in this one, this is a marriage of convenience trope. If you enjoy that, this is a really good one. And this is like, this lady really needs it. Like, her family are out to get her, and she needs an escape. And she says this man, who is like a rake, but like the worst, like the most notorious, like if you think of like man whore, like this is him. And he also needs money, so he's like, and he kind of doesn't take her seriously at first. Like, he's attracted to her, but like this man can get anybody he wants, so he's not really like super, he doesn't think much of this girl. But over time he realizes like how special she is. And I really like that this book like had a woman that could kind of cut him down to size, you know what I mean? And not in a like malevolent way, but just she had standards, and if she was like, you know, if you want to be married to me, you have to be faithful to me, and she was like upholding that. So they had this like 3-month thing. I think they had sex once to consummate their marriage, and then she was like, yeah, no, I'm gonna need you to be celibate for like 3 months, and let's see if you're serious about this thing. And he like got it together, and I think that this was just a really nice book. So this is the last book, you know, I think as far as romances go, just something to enjoy, to move on. Yeah, you might remember some about it, but it's not gonna be like the most life-changing novel, you know what I mean? Especially because they're later installments in a series. This one, Devil in Winter, is number 3 in a Wallflowers series, and the Wallflowers series is good. This is not a new series, this is an old series, but it's pretty much a classic at this point. And so you can go back and find those. All of these are really strong stories individually, and then together as a series. Lisa Kleypas really creates a universe that can keep you, you know, suspended for a while. So number 3 is Wellness by Nathan Hill. Now this book came out last year, and I thought this was a really good book. I was surprised because this was a blind read for me. So for me, that meant that I didn't read the description beforehand. I didn't know, more so than the genre. I just made sure the genre wasn't like horror or mystery or thriller. I do not enjoy those. But I just thought, okay, it's fiction, let me try it. I don't read that many male authors, let me try it. So my summary on Goodreads, or my one line, was it's kind of mansplaining, but it is very, very good. By mansplaining, I mean you can tell when a man is like trying to explain something he knows really well. So there were a few times where he was describing music, or he was describing, you know, like new bands at the time, or he was explaining, he was describing psychology terms and stuff like that, which it was clear he did research, because I don't think this author is like an expert in all these things at once, maybe even over time having acquired this knowledge. But the way it was written into the characters, and it was just very mansplaining. But the book was really one of those rare books that is able to examine what they call the human condition. So it talks about, you know, serious issues. It talks about being, you know, a sickly child. It talks about psychology. It talks about research and how much of it is bias. It talks about the placebo effect, and all of these things I'm saying seem very random, but they were all covered in this book and covered really well. And at the end of this is really a story about love. It was one of the books I thought, it made me realize that maybe I have a little bit of, what's the opposite of misandry? I don't know. I don't want to say I'm a misandrist. That's the opposite of misogyny. But it made me realize that I don't hold male novelists in that high of an esteem, because I was so surprised at how well I thought this author described falling in love. And he wrote it both from a male perspective and from a female perspective, and I thought it was just so good. And I think this is one of those books that I need a physical copy of. I would read again. You know, it had tragedy in there, but it wasn't like the type that you can't recover from, and it had you weeping. It was just a book that after you read it, you were thinking about it for a few days. You know what I mean? And you want a copy of it on your shelf. So I think this was really well done. I hadn't heard about this author before. Mind you, I don't read that much like non-romance fiction or non-chick fiction or women's fiction, but I was really happy that I took the chance and read this as a blind read. So yeah, I really recommend this one. This was 5 out of 5 for me. So book number 4 out of 6 is the Heaven and Earth Grocery Store. Now people, this book, I don't want to say it was shoved down my throat, but every app, I use Libby, I use all the apps, Kindle, Audible. This book has been on like the homepage of all these apps for so long, and I thought, well, here's another blind read. As long as it's not mystery, it's not thriller, let me go ahead and give it a chance, right? Without reading the description. People, this is tragedy. This book is tragedy. It's tragic. It has stories that are based in truth, right? So it's based on the histories of African Americans and Jews back in the, I want to say it was the 60s maybe, in Pennsylvania. And there are things, the challenge I have with these kinds of books is, you know, it's based on stories, and there are even worse stories that could have happened. This is not a book about direct slavery. This is not a book about the Holocaust, which had even more tragic real things happen to people. It was just a book about people who would have descended of those things, right? But it was just tragic. Why do we have to be reading in 2024 about the account of rape? Why do we have to be reading about rape, and not just women, children, men, you know, imprisonment, mental institutions that aren't really helping people, stuff like that, you know? And so to me, especially for a blind read, it was trauma. But you know, I'm really happy I read it, because these are the kinds of books that give you more context for the world and some of the things we experience, why we are the way we are. You know, it gives you more context about the Jewish community in America, and we know they're a very powerful community today. But it gives us more history about the fact that they were seen as similar to black people in the sense of social leverage, all being immigrants and later immigrants, and for white people in America not being seen pleasantly, you know, in those, even though they were themselves white. And so it gave history, you know, for them in that time, and that's something I didn't know as a non-American. But boy, this book was just trauma in a book. And but you know, I get why it's special, but it at the same time just makes me wonder, why is it always the books that detail horrific things that get lauded and praised and nominated for national book awards and stuff like that? So I don't know, but if you want to read books that everybody's talking about, this is one as good as any to read. So number 5 of this month that I read is one called The Slowest Burn. Now this was an advanced reader copy. This was my first advanced reader copy, so that was special for me. And what that means is, before a book is published, leading up to being published, publishers can decide to give books to audiences to read, to test if there's anything before they don't usually pull the book. At this point, it's been through edits and all of that. It's got a cover, it's in its final form, but it's just one last chance, you know, to get feedback on it and to have reviews, public reviews on it before it's sent out to the masses. And also, if there's anything that is that terrible about the book, that they can, you know, make a last minute switcheroo. So this one was a really nice book. It's a debut, so it's the first book by this author, Sarah Chamberlain. I thought it was really special. What I liked a few things about this book. Let's talk about the characters. For the female character, for the main topic of the book, it was about cooking. This is a ghostwriter for cookbooks, and she's assigned to this chef that recently won a cooking competition, and he's like short, you know, so this is a departure from a typical rom-com, right, or a typical romance novel. So, you know, they always make romances to be what everybody would think they want. So tall guy, super handsome, has his stuff together, has his life together, and this guy's not that, okay? He's shorter but still extremely charming. He struggles to he's got ADHD, so he struggles with some like executive functioning things, and so, you know, the first part of this book is this ghostwriter who it's her job to get these books written in the voice of the authors. So the ideas come from the authors themselves, but she now puts it into a form that the average person, chefs make really complicated recipes, and she makes it into a form that you and I, the average consumer, could pick up and cook, right? So that was a really cool premise to me, like reading something like that. And then, you know, this book was really, really special in that it took on some topics that were just like everyday things. That I love when a book takes up everyday topics and writes it in such a way that it's believable. You're seeing character development. So like, this lady's a widow, her husband died really young, and, you know, she's supporting her family, her in-laws, and they're almost like dependent on her now, and she wants to move out, but she like doesn't want to hurt their feelings. And she also doesn't, she also had a really terrible experience growing up where she had to be grown up too quickly, and now she doesn't know how to speak up for herself. And then this guy comes along and he wants her to speak up for herself, and she speaks up for him when she can, and you know, it's just, the character development is there, and I thought that was really, really nice to see. And then the romance, there was like trope. It was one of the first books I've read, I think, that had like trope, what would you call it, like trope fishing, where you didn't know if it was gonna follow some of the common romance tropes. So there's like the one bed trope, it's almost like that, but then it didn't. It also had like the favor trope, like do this thing for me, I do this thing for you, and then we never see each other again trope. And it almost didn't, and I didn't know if that was intentional or not, but I thought it was really fun. Because with tropes, right, you think you know how it's gonna go, but then you don't. In this case, because it didn't actually follow through with the trope. So I gave this book 5. I thought it was so refreshing, and I recommend it. And again, it was my first like advanced reader copy, so shout out to the publishers. And yeah, I love it. I can't wait to read more from this new author. So yeah, let's see what comes of it. I'm interested to see how it's received when it comes out. So the last book I read this month, number 6, is called The House of Plain Truth, and this is by an author from a Caribbean author, Jamaican author. She lives in the US right now, but she's originally from Jamaica. And this book is, I read this for part of the Book of Saints book club, and this one I gave a 3 out of 5 stars, and let me tell you why. So I expected a lot from this book. This book is supposed to when you start this book, you read chapter 1. Again, this was a blind read. I'm trying to be brave, guys. I'm not a typically brave person. You'll see I read a lot of romance. That's because you know what's going to happen in the end. Everybody gets a happily ever after, right? Now, I'm trying to expand my horizons, come out of that, you know. So I took up this book. You know, it's fine. I didn't expect it to be a horror story. So I said, okay, let me give it a try. And you know what? I was so disappointed. I expected more. So in the first part of this book, right, then the main character, the narrator, her father is dying, and her father says, you know, you are my memory now, find them for me. She doesn't know what he's talking about. So in the book, we're figuring out, she's learning that she grew up with her 2 older sisters, and they had even older siblings. Or is she the oldest of those last 3? No, she's the middle one of the last 3. She grew up the middle of the last 3 siblings, but they actually had 3 or 4 older siblings that they left back in Cuba because their parents had gone to Cuba to try to get back in the 60s, 70s, to try to get work, right? In the Caribbean, there's a common thread of that where we're from developing countries, there isn't as much money to go around, but other economies need workers for things, so they will go do work and they'll go back to their countries after having earned more money. Fine. The dad, he's dying, his dying wish, he says to his middle daughter who is home, you are my memory now, find them for me, literally. Now when a book starts like that, it keeps saying that, the man is saying that till he dies. You expect some sort of taken quest, right? You expect this lady to get up and be in Cuba tomorrow. Can I tell you, this book was like 2 parts, probably 20, 30 chapters overall. This lady didn't get to Cuba till the very last chapter, and it was in like the last part of the last chapter. So all of this story, this man is clearly like, go find them, you have siblings. She's wondering about the siblings, she's uncovering this story. In all this time, this book was really about a returning resident. That happens a lot in the Caribbean too. So people will go away for a long time for a better life, and they'll return home after they've made something. They'll buy a house, or they'll inherit their family home, which is what kind of happened in this case. And you know, they're trying to figure out what to do with it. Do they live there, whatever? And that's all this story was. And I was expecting so much more. It was set up to be so much more. And this is not to say the author didn't do a good job writing what she wrote. She wrote about life in Jamaica in the countryside. She wrote about the unique challenges of a returning resident. And I'm sure there are people who would really enjoy that. But it was so disappointing. And then on top of it, there was this theme of like hauntings and ghosts, as if the man, you know, when he died, he didn't quite pass off into the other life. He was like around as a ghost, which is fine. You know, we have stories about that in the Caribbean. We believe in what we call the duppy or ghost. That was fine, but if you're gonna commit to that, commit. Be a duppy story, go be a little spooky. I do not like that, but I feel like even I could have handled a little bit more. So I was just disappointed by the execution. But you know, here's one more Caribbean author who's written a good book. Okay, it wasn't 4 or even 5 out of 5 for me, but 3 out of 5 is pretty good, so can't complain. Don't feel like I'm wasting my time. And I guess I'll round out this by mentioning one other book that I started but I just did not finish. I don't think I'll go back. It's one called Signs, and it's about this psychic lady, and she's supposed to be giving tips about opening yourself to receiving signs from the universe and stuff like that. And I had nothing against that, but probably a chapter or two in, I realized that it was just gonna be a story of anecdotes of her with her clients that she's done psychic work for. And yeah, she's saying you have to be able to pay attention to the signs, but outside of that, it felt very repetitive. And I didn't have 9 hours. The book was 9 hours long to listen. Maybe I'd gotten through an hour, maybe not so much. I didn't have 8 more hours of that in me, so I didn't finish it. But hey, if it's something that you're super interested, I was curious, genuinely curious, but I couldn't finish. So that's 1/3 of the year done, and I'm kind of, I don't want to say embarrassed, but given everything else I have going on in my life, this is not my full-time job. I set a modest goal of 30 books for myself. I have read 24 out of 30 books this year. Kind of embarrassed about that because what? I'm sorry, what? I'm reading on average 6 books a month. I am reading on average 6 books a month, okay? I have a full-time job. I have a family. I enjoy reading. This is not complaining. This is just saying to myself, golly, like, am I really gonna finish this book, these goals before, like, within, what, 5 months of the year at the rate I'm going? That's crazy. But anyways, I guess when you just love to read, you just love to read, huh? Anyway, see you guys next month. Hope you have a good month of May.